Hey you guys, welcome to part 2 of what to do with your scrap fabric. So as I mentioned in the last tutorial, or the first tutorial shall I say, you just want to find a big piece of your scrap fabric and then just kind of separate it from the rest of the fabric. So here I'm just cutting out a big rectangle, and then I'm dividing the rectangle into 2 squares. And for now we're just going to need one of these squares, but definitely check out my other tutorial to see what I did with the other square. So now we want to make our pattern. So we're going to take our pattern paper and fold it in half. Use the paperweight if you need to. And we're just going to start by marking off 2.75 inches, the top and the bottom of 2.75 inches. From the top, we're going to mark off 3.25 inches. Then from the top, we're going to mark off 2 inches down. Then from here, we're going to mark off 4.75 inches across. And then from here, we're going to mark off 4 inches down. So now you have the outline of your pattern, and I'm just going to go ahead and make these points stronger so that you can see them a little better. Now what you want to do is just connect the outer dots like so. And once you've done that, you have your pattern. So obviously we want to go ahead and we want to add seam allowance all around this pattern for when we have to sew. Then you want to cut out around the seam allowance line, and your pattern is like this. Have you guys figured out yet what we're making? So now we're going to fold our rectangle, our square, in half so that we have 2 rectangles out of the square. And then we're going to take this rectangle and we're going to fold it in half, and we're going to put our pattern on top of it as well. And we're just going to trace the pattern as much as we can. As you can see, the pattern is overlapping, so just trace what you can and we'll go back and we'll fix the pattern accordingly. So now we're just going to add some lines here to the side so that the pattern is within the fabric. So I'm just adding a straight line for now to connect those 2 diagonal lines, and then I'm going to add another straight line to connect these 2 diagonal lines. And then after that, I'm just going to curve off where the straight line is, just curving it into the other lines like so. Create a nice little C curve here, and also here, and also here. And then we're going to put the seam allowance line inside of the pattern. Then we want to just pin down the pattern like so, and we're just going to cut along the seam allowance line. Then from here, we just want to transfer the seam allowance line to the other half of the pattern like so. And there you have your pattern. And you're just going to fold this in half, and you're going to fold the other rectangle in half, and you're just going to place this on top of the other rectangle, and then you're going to trace it. And just pin it down so that it's a little easier to trace. And when you trace it, it will look like this. And then you're just going to add the seam allowance line inside of the pattern, and then pin it down after you've done that. And then after you've pinned it down, what you want to do is you want to just cut out along the outer seam allowance line like so. Take your pins out and then open the pattern, and you just want to transfer that seam allowance line all along the other half of the pattern like you did with the other. So now you have 2 pieces. Then you want to cut a piece of an elastic. My elastic was about 14.5 inches, but you can determine the size of your elastic based on the back of your head from ear to ear. Now we're going back to that scrap fabric, and we're going to look for a really long section of the scrap fabric that's going to be basically about double the length and double the width of the elastic that we just cut out. So from that, you want to make a pattern that's basically double the width of the elastic by double the length of the elastic, and you want to add seam allowance all around the pattern, and then your pattern should look like this basically. And now we're going to take the pattern and we're going to fold it in half, and we're going to pin it and make sure that the seam allowance lines are on the outside, and you're just going to sew along this long seam allowance line. Okay, And when we do this, we're basically creating the casing for that piece of elastic. So when you're done, it should look like this. And now what we want to do is we want to use maybe a loop turner. Check the description box for this loop turner. If you don't have a loop turner, you can just use a safety pin, and you want to basically turn the tube inside out so that the raw edges are now on the inside of the tube. So it looks nice and finished. Next thing we want to do is we want to insert the elastic into the tube. So you can either use a loop turner for this, or you can just use a safety pin. Here I'm using a safety pin just to show you guys how I did it. And you want to make sure that you don't let the elastic go all the way into the tube, because then your elastic will get lost. So once the end of the elastic and the tube meet up, you just want to pin it down into place, and then go back to your safety pin and continue to gather the rest of the fabric down until that other end of the elastic is at the top of the tube, and then just pin it down. So now you have pinned down both ends of the elastic, and you're just going to sew down the edges like so. And then the gathering, to make it even, you're just going to pull both ends, and now you can see it's evenly gathered like so. So I just made another pattern from an old towel, and I made this because I want the mask to be nice and sturdy. But if you don't have an old towel, you can use felt or batting fabric, and then you're just going to transfer that seam allowance line to the pattern. Then from there, you're going to put that pattern on top of the other pattern. You're just going to pin it down, and then you're going to sew. As you can see here, I just glued down some flowers, and I used like a nice silky fabric. So you can definitely get creative with this awesome Christmas gift, or gift in general. All right, so thank you guys so much for watching. Be sure to check out my other tutorials, my other videos in general. Leave me a comment, like this video, and subscribe to my channel if you haven't already. Thanks for watching. Ciao.